So at this point, we're getting into our conversation for this hour, and we're looking specifically at understanding constitutionalism and women's rights. And the very lovely Daisy Amdany is here with us this morning in my favorite color. Daisy, good morning.
Good morning, Good morning, CT. Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good.
You seem a bit flustered.
Amazing how time can get away from you in the morning.
When you think
it does that, especially in the morning. One moment it's 5 o'clock, and then you turn around and you look at the watch again, it's 7, and you're thinking, what happened when the 2 hours go to? Yes.
But it's not even just the morning. I think I've been saying time is moving so fast. When we were younger, when I was in school, I mean, not just school, even, my early working days, time just didn't seem to move, Now, you blink, it's January. You blink, it's December.
August 29th.
Next it's 2024. It will be 2030. I mean, time is moving.
It is. And even as it moves, there are certain things that need to happen because, there's no time like the present to get them done, to get them spoken about, to get them, sorted out. And one of those things is the conversation that we're having today when we talk about constitutionalism and women's rights. So thank you for being here today. Let's welcome you properly so you get a Wusa moment. CT has Proverbs this week from Algeria.
Okay.
The People's Republic.
Oh, sorry, please. The People's Republic.
Yes. It's a very interesting country, though. This, we were colonized by just one group of people. Came from some place in Europe called England. They later called it Great Britain. But Algeria were fortunate that there were quite a number of people who traversed their land and claimed ownership at some point. Have you heard of the Phoenicians?
Yeah.
Romans, everybody has heard of the Romans.
Yeah.
Yes. Have you heard of the Vandals?
The people who steal from people. No?
Well, have you heard of the Goths?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Byzantine? Greeks? Turks, of course.
Beware of Greeks.
Sure.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Now, the Turks were the lords of the Ottoman Empire, remember? Now, when you have a country that has been visited by very many groups of people who at some point or the other claimed to own an empire and so you're part of it, it means that's a country that has gone through very many changes. But often neglected in this whole equation are the natives, the people who originally called that their land. Yes, the Berbers, or it's written Berber, but we pronounce it Berbers.
Yeah.
Former minority, but it was their country. Yet the majority of people in that country now are of Arab descent.
Yeah.
Okay. The proverb. What did I want to say today?
The Algerian proverb.
The proverb, the water and the chopping.
This was me thinking aloud.
Okay.
Cross the loud river and don't cross the silent one.
Daisy?
I think it reminds me of yet another proverb. I don't know where it's drawn from, where it talks about still waters running deep. So the quiet waters may be quiet, but are hiding a lot of things, underneath, and you cannot establish the depth of them or the perils that might be in there.
Lurking beneath.
Whereas that which is loud and bubbly and everything shows itself. So I think if you look at it in reference to how to, those who what you see is what you get, and others, you do not know the depths of what you're dealing with.
Very true. Very interesting, actually. That water can be, mirrored in so many other things.
Yes, it can.
Even for human beings and how we operate.
When you talk about the force of nature, what always comes to mind?
It does.
As does the wind.
Okay, so we're looking at constitutionalism this morning and women's rights, Daisy. And we hear this big word all the time. So how about there as a place to start with before we now marry the two and how they can work hand in hand? Constitutionalism and ism, belief. What exactly is constitutionalism, first of all?
I think constitutionalism is really abiding by the constitution that you set, agreeing as a people, as a country, to be guided by the set of laws that you have bequeathed yourself, right? That this is your organizing document. This is who we say we are on paper. And so we then work towards being or working within the confines of those laws that we have put in place. Yes.
So why is it important then that people within a boundary of a nation, for example, operate within, if they do have the constitution, which is the supreme law, why is it important that you abide within, the boundaries then of this constitutionalism? Why?
Because people a nation is made up of people of different beliefs, different faiths, different traditions, and different cultures. However, the Constitution sets for us what we have agreed as a people called Kenya, despite our various tribes, despite our different religions and cultures and traditions, we have agreed to be organized like this, as is enshrined within this constitution. And so there are places where your tradition and your practices are set aside because of the aspirations of who we have said we are as a people. Because the constitution says who Kenyans, the aspirations that Kenyans want to see in their country. This is who we are, right? So it is important that we be guided by that, because you can imagine the kind of chaos if everybody was doing their own thing, If everybody does what seems right in their own eyes, it can be very chaotic.
Is that not what we are currently...
Yes, we are, because now in Kenya we have a situation where we have what is called constitutions without constitutionalism, whereby we have leaders that refuse to be fettered within the bounds of the constitution and basically want to do as they please, right? And it's important also because, the constitution, it sets it restrains, it constrains power and disperses it as well, to different offices and to different sections, right? So it is a very important document because it also gives us the consistency that we need as a nation, so that people are not just doing as they please. When you have rules and when you have laws, it gives you guidance and gives you certain expectations. We expect that when you get into this office, this is how you are required to behave. These are the limits of your power, right? These are the limits of how far you can go, right? So you are not supposed to extend, you agree. So when, you see our president swears allegiance to the Constitution, as do our members of parliament when they take oath of office. All cabinet secretaries, they all swear allegiance, and they agree to be bound by the Constitution, to uphold it, and to protect it, right? Because it's an important document, right? It sets it is the organizing document for Kenya.
Yes.
Okay? It is the contract between those that govern, or those that are given the privilege to govern, and those to whom the power belongs, that is, the rights holders. So, of course, it declares the people as sovereign. So the sovereign have agreed to be governed in this. So it's essentially our social contract.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So just like the way you have contracts, when a contract is breached, then, of course, there's cause for concern, right? But it gives you expectations. If today, your job description is to be a radio presenter, and when you are being assessed, you are told that you didn't clean the toilets. That is not your job, And there are certain things that that you can say, no, this is not my job. However, there are things that are required of you that and then you do them, right? So it's the same thing. It's a social contract between those that are being governed, those that are governing. It establishes the bounds and boundaries of power, rights, and entitlements, and also responsibilities.
Who holds... So from constitutionalism and looking at the Constitution, then there are those who are directly involved in making sure that it is lived out in the way it was meant to from its origin. There are those who are the guardians of it, And that's everybody at some level.
That is everybody, not at some level.
As in, you as an individual, you as somebody in government, everybody has, at whatever level, everybody has something that they're supposed to be doing to ensure that the Constitution lives out, right?
Yes.
So when that doesn't happen, who is to hold the other to account?
Well, then the people who are offended can then claim they can seek redress, right? So first of all, it binds all of us. So it binds state officers, public officers, and it binds all citizens, right? We are bound, all of us. So we are all bound to uphold the Constitution. So there's nobody who is excluded from abiding by the Constitution. However, if there's an infringement, the Constitution says that the courts, we can go to the courts, and the courts then interpret the Constitution. They have been given that right to interpret the Constitution, right?
Are we all bound in the same way? I mean, is our understanding of this binding, is our understanding of this social contract the same? Because if I look at the genesis of just the basic understanding of any social contract, it begins at birth and the social setup in which you are reared. That's where you understand it.
Sure.
Because within a family, there's always a social contract.
Yes.
This is how you go about it.
Yes.
Now,
and you're instructed from childhood.
Exactly.
Yes.
Does that social contract then not more or less set the foundation of how it is I'm going to be interpreting social contracts in the future?
So we are supposed to be taught this because, you see, I think one of the misconceptions is that the Constitution is supposed to be interpreted by people who understand law. But because we are all bound by it, we have a responsibility to know it, because we have certain rights and responsibilities under the Constitution. So it should be taught to us, right? So the Constitution should actually be taught from school, so that people understand what it is, because the Constitution sets who we are as Kenyans.
Right.
So you need to know, what are my rights that I may be able to claim them, but what are my responsibilities that I may be able to do them? And I think this is what we are seeing today, like with the Gen Z. When the Gen Z have been going out, when they've been going out and protesting, what are they doing? They're claiming their rights as enshrined in the Constitution, right?
Okay, yeah.
They know and they understand their rights, right? And so they're able to demand accountability from the duty bearers, who rightfully are supposed to be accountable.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as the Constitution as it is broad.
Very.
Broad in the sense that, it handles very, very many issues.
Yes.
From education to what is the rights of Kenyans, to what you should do in governance, etc., etc. One of the big ticket items in the Constitution is gender equality and the rights of women. Let's go into that a little bit and say, what does the Constitution actually say for those two areas in Kenya today? What is supposed to be, and what is the current situation? And if there is, what's the cause for concern?
Okay, so the Constitution gives rights and entitlements to all persons, including women, youth, and persons with disability, and centers issues of inclusion, equality, equity, and participation of the people.
Okay.
It is among the national values and principles of governance. Now, it's important to understand why it is enshrined in the Constitution, because of where we came from. Remember that we had an independence constitution. The independence constitution was a negotiated document. Constitutions are usually negotiated documents.
Yeah.
But it was negotiated with the outgoing colonial powers, who obviously were trying to secure certain entitlements, their own entitlements, and the incoming natives, right? So it was a few people. It was negotiated. It was a few people negotiating at the desk. But when you look at how the law was framed, women were not recognized, or rather didn't have the same rights and entitlements that their male counterparts had. For instance, women could not confer citizenship to their children.
Okay.
Like, assuming that you are a Kenyan woman married to a foreign person, and you give birth in Kenya, you gave birth in Kenya,
Yes.
you would assume, and you would assume that your child would be Kenyan. But because the father was not Kenyan, the law did not give you, a Kenyan woman, the right to confer citizenship to your child, even when born in Kenya. Okay? Yet, the law conferred citizenship to a child born of a Kenyan father, even if they were born outside. Of Kenya. So, completely, you were complete. I mean, like, you were excluded that way. The other thing is, their laws did not recognize women as bona fide citizens. I remember as recently, because, you know, I'm not that old, as recently as when we were in school.
Before you go on, the bona fide meaning, what's the meaning of the word bona fide?
Card carrying member.
Yes.
I mean, was legitimate?
Well, I suppose you could say some way legitimate, but like a card carrying member of something. Because
why I ask is because it has legal implications, does it not?
Yes, it did. It had.
Please continue.
Okay. As recently as when we were in school, women, to open a bank account, you needed either, if you were married, the permission of your husband.
Yes.
If you were not married, your father. If you had no father, your brother. And if you had none of those, then maybe the chief or your pastor or your religious leader. In essence, the law...
Some male individual.
Yes, a male individual, but basically saying that an adult woman did not have the agency of even a male child, boy, you know. Even the laws, the way the laws were framed, you know, even around assault, sexual assault, that you would have to be able to prove your case, whereas a male child could, by their own word, be taken. We know that the culture did not allow tradition and culture, and of course then it was in practice, the inheritance. Women were excluded from inheriting because women were basically seen as property.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So you were for bringing cows to the homestead. So you are bought. When you go, you know, property cannot own property. So you were moved around as property.
Yeah.
In your homestead, you were for bringing cows. In the homestead where you had been acquired, you were an acquisition. So you had really no rights. And we still see in some areas, certain pockets of that kind of discrimination. So girl child, women, we witnessed, not too long ago, remember that the late Vice President, Kijana Wamalwa, when he passed away, do you remember his wife being seated?
Yes.
In a circle with elders, and the elders were the ones who were determining how the property would be divided. And so you find that women were rendered destitute at widowhood and families, right? At marriage, if you could not prove your contribution, so that even the work, what we call the unpaid work that women do, being housewives, being at home, looking after the family, building the assets of the homestead, that was not considered work or a contribution. So unless you could show tangible contribution, you had no rights. You would women were being divorced and rendered destitute, you know? So, I mean, there's so many things. And then, of course, also, even though it was not stated in law, leadership was essentially, by practice and tradition, the preserve of men.
You talk about the examples that you gave, Daisy, before. A time past, no? Women don't have to worry about those issues anymore. You can walk into a bank today and open an account and nobody's asking who your father is or, bring your husband's, whatever it is. You can go to school, you can graduate, you can go to PhD level, you can be a member of parliament, get it by vote, you can be a governor. By golly, you can run for president and somebody will even take notice of you. See, it's fine.
No, it's not fine.
No?
We're just at the beginning because there's a lot of resistance. We also need to understand that our culture and traditions set our basis for socialization, right? And we are socialized according to that to have certain beliefs, right? Now, the law is a tool for social change, 100%, which is why we've been able to do these things. There was a time, indeed, girls were not going to school. And so there was a fight for girls to go to school and affirmative action measures for girls to go to school and higher learning, including, lowering some marks and everything.
Yes.
Today, we still have equitable measures that are being put in place that are not quite, that are not, we're still seeing hiccups here and there.
Yeah.
For instance, the provision of sanitary towels for school-going girls, right? So that when these things are not done in a timely fashion, or when there's misappropriation in that area, it affects girl child. We are also beginning to see certain trends that are not favorable for the girl child, which then hampers her upward mobility in education. Issues around teen pregnancy, early child marriage. It's still happening, right? It is still happening in Kenya. It is against the law, right? But it's still happening.
Can I ask
enforcement.
So I just want to ask for purposes of clarification. When we look at things like, what would be a right for a girl to have access to sanitary towels, school-going age, and that doesn't happen, is that going against women's rights, or is that just an exemplification of poor governance across board?
Both.
Okay.
Both. Because it is it is poor governance, it's mismanagement, but you're also denying her the right to her education, right? Because by not providing this, Article 43 on socioeconomic rights actually sets education as a right? And so when the state then commits, because remember that the Bill of Rights, one of the opening statement in the Bill of Rights is that these are rights that are due to you because you're human. The state doesn't give you these rights, but the state commits to ensuring the enjoyment of those rights to the fullest extent possible. And so puts in place measures to ensure that you're able to enjoy those rights.
Yes.
So among those for the girl child is to make provision of sanitary towels because of poverty. There are some there are some girls who cannot access sanitary towels. So the state commits to making sure that sanitary towels are available so that girls do not have cause not to attend school because of their menstruation, right? So when the state fails, it denies those girls their right to access that education or slows down, hampers their educational goals, right? So it's both. It's both a denial of their rights by mismanagement, by maladministration.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
The thing that I've always found interesting is looking at the evolution of the changes that bring about not just equality but also equity to the citizenry of a country. But perhaps it's better understood if we compare it with, say, our neighbors. So whenever one talks about progress, there is no progress without comparison. You cannot really understand it. You have to juxtapose it to something else before you can understand it. So when we talk about the rights of women and the progress that we have made as Kenyans, if we were to compare ourselves with our neighbors, how would you say we are faring?
I think that, let me start by saying that, and I'll quote Museveni on this, when he talked about African nations measuring themselves against each other, and he said it was a competition of dwarfs, trying to see which one was taller. Let me also say that we are not to measure ourselves against our neighbors. We are supposed to measure ourselves against the goals that we have set in the Constitution. That is our unit of measure, right? Our unit of measure is how are we doing we are even the president is required every year to address the nation, state of the nation.
Yes.
And he is supposed to give us a scoring of telling us how we are doing as a nation against the goals that we have set and the aspirations that we have set as Kenyans, right? Mm-hmm. So that is our measure. But when we look at regionally, I think that Kenya, in terms of women in leadership, we are lagging. I mean, even countries that were birthed here in Kenya are doing better than us. Okay? Mm-hmm. And so that for me is problematic. We are the only country in the region that have not met the minimum goals as set by the region and by ourselves as a country. So that's problem number one. I think now with the kind of chaos that we're seeing in the education sector, I think that we are going to, there will be a heavy price to be paid soon, right? In the not too distant future, whereby unless we very seriously course correct, we are going to find ourselves in lagging behind, as it is already. Mm-hmm. We have Kenyans who are now beginning to send their children to some of our regional schools. They send their children to school in Uganda. They are sending their children to school in I'm not sure about Rwanda, but I know they are sending children to school in Uganda. The ones who are bringing their children here are bringing them to very high-end private schools, right, that are very well run. And these are those schools that you will do well, group of schools type, you will do well if you come out of that. But our public education system is not doing well at all.
I want to ask a question when we talk about leadership, women's leadership, because this has continued to be an issue, Daisy. And it's interesting because it's Diana who's reminded me about that conversation. When we say that, you've just alluded to it now, that we still have a problem when it comes to women representation in leadership, and the need to ask the question, why? When we talk about the 2/3 gender principle, when we talk about making sure that you have more women, and that doesn't happen. We talked the other day about the dissolution of parliament on the basis that the principles have not been met in terms of representation. But isn't it important that we ask the question, why? Why is it that we don't see this representation coming to the fore? Why is it that you still see that there's an abrogation of rights over and over and over again? Instead of just saying dissolve the whole thing and toss it out, you will have a repetition of the same behavior if you don't deal with the reason as to why this is happening. You can dissolve parliament as many times as you want. You can, and because it's the law, or you can say one or two, three things, but if you're not looking at the it could be that maybe the patriarchy still stands. It could be that maybe there is an inherent belief that women should not lead. It should be that there is an inherent belief that there is another place where women should be, and that these rights that we speak of maybe should be lived out in another way. It doesn't matter what it is, but there's a reason behind it. Shouldn't that be what we then look at when we talk about constitutionalism and say, how do we go about it if the thought process is still, or the mindset is still in a particular direction?
So, remember I've said the law is a tool for social change. So, by enforcing the law, you then make people move towards the change that we need to see.
Do you?
Yes, we do. For instance, look at the 47 seats, right? The 47 seats are enshrined in the Constitution, right? Those 47 women reps, the Constitution is very clear that they must be women, okay?
Yeah.
And therefore, each county must elect one woman by universal suffrage. Just by their presence alone, they are breaking barriers. Where tradition and culture says women cannot be leaders, women cannot be elected, the law has made provision that by universal suffrage, the entire county will elect at least one woman, right? Yeah. So by just being there, they're telling a different story, right? Presence, perception, right? Now, the dissolution of parliament is not because of the 2/3 gender principle. It is for failure to enact the law. The Constitution has an accountability and enforcement mechanism in Article 261. Article 261(7) provides that if Parliament does not enact the legislation within the time frame as set in the 5th schedule, then anyone can petition the courts for the courts to intervene. And so the courts will give Parliament, the legislature, a determined time within which they are to enact that legislation and, of course, report on progress to the CJ. But if Parliament then fails to enact that legislation within the time frame that has been given by the courts under 261, then anyone can petition the CJ for the dissolution of Parliament. It goes on to say that if Parliament is dissolved for failure to enact a particular legislation, the next Parliament that comes in has the time frame within the fifth schedule to enact that law. But if they do not, they too can be dissolved. So it is an accountability and enforcement mechanism. Okay? Now, Parliament have failed. There was an advisory that was given in August of 2012.
Yes, okay.
That within 5 years of promulgation, that is 2015, August 27th, 2015, the law on representation, as enshrined in Article 100, which requires Parliament to enact legislation to provide for the participation of women, youth, persons with disabilities, ethnic and other minorities, and also Article 81, that's on the electoral system, that it must have a mechanism to ensure that not more than 2/3 of members of elective public bodies are of the same gender.
Right.
Parliament has not passed to date that law. So Parliament sits with a membership that offends Article 3, which says you cannot form government except as per the laid down principles in the Constitution. It offends Article 27(8), which says in any elective or appointive body, you shall have no more than 2/3 of the same gender. It offends Article 81 because it has not made sure that elective public bodies do not have more than 2/3 of the same gender. So by not enacting the law, it has now gone on to allow for the offense of several articles of the Constitution. So that I chalk it down to socialization bias, okay? Which, by the way, they are not supposed to legislate through that bias, but that is what has been driving.
Please explain.
So we're socialized a certain way, right? And for the longest time, women, the way society and culture has constructed gender, it does not assign certain power roles or roles that are considered powerful to women. Women, because leadership is seen as power.
Yes.
It is power. It's not just seen as, it is power. So the construction of gender does not assign roles to women in powerful positions, does not assign roles that give women power or even opportunity for power, money roles, you know? So you find that traditionally women were always excluded from those things. And so that idea that a woman cannot be a leader at par with men. So even the perception that we were given, you look from independence, cabinet, parliament, everything is just men. Aka woman there, you know. So, and even those women who were seen in or even aspiring to leadership roles were considered rogue elements because you are going to a place that has not been assigned to you. So the law must also support in the deconstruction and reconstruction of gender because gender is a social construct. It is constructed and can be deconstructed and reconstructed, which is what our Constitution is seeking to do. To deconstruct and reconstruct it by saying that we have equal opportunity before the law, men and women, right? Women have the right to equal opportunity in the political, social, and economic and cultural spheres, right? And sets the baseline for where that journey begins. It talks about, if you go to Article 27 is in the Bill of Rights, and it's on equality and freedom from discrimination. It declares that everyone is equal before the law and has equal benefit of the law. It also goes on to say that the state shall take, Article 27(6), the state shall take affirmative action, legislative, policy, and other measures to redress the marginalizations that have been suffered by the previously marginalized groups, right? And so previously marginalized groups are those groups who, before the effective date of the Constitution, did not enjoy the same privileges that everyone enjoyed. So the state is supposed to take active measures to do that. But then it sets the baseline in 27.8. It says, in addition to those measures that are contemplated in 27.6, the state shall ensure that in any elective or appointive body, there shall be no more than 2/3 of the same gender. So it sets the baseline. That's ground zero. So ideally, what we are working to is to a more equal society that we want to see in leadership, in culture, in the economic sphere. We want it mirrored the way we are as a people, right?
Right.
Kenya is over 50% of women. So we can, having 50-50, you remember President Ruto said that he would have 50-50 cabinet, men, women. That's ideal because that's how we are structured as a society, right? Just in the same way that we say that the cabinet must reflect the ethnic composition of our country, that, you know, it should mirror the face of Kenya. That's what, so the Constitution is setting, is actually guiding us towards now bringing that more equitable society in practice and in law.
In law.
Okay?
Okay.
Now, these guys, because if you listen to the arguments that they are putting, they are saying...
There is who here?
Who's they?
Those who are refusing to put the law.
Maybe they think that there's not too much of an issue. Because the question is, Daisy, and I see many of those questions every day. What's the issue? Because those things that you talk about are not as overt as they were before. Like I said, you can get along without a problem. I mean, you can be a governor today if you're a woman. Nobody's going to ask you questions.
But it's that much harder.
Is it as overt as it was? Because that's the question people are asking.
Let me speak as a man.
What is the problem?
Okay, let's hear from the man.
Yes.
Let me tell you, the mindset of someone who has been socialized with an understanding of privilege expects that privilege to be the status quo for them. And that is what happens with patriarchy.
Yeah.
And because of the privilege, they do not want to move. It's not that this discussion isn't understood.
Okay.
The argument that you put across is a valid one in the eyes of those who believe that the little that they have seen is adequate. That's the argument. But
Wanataka nini?
yeah, it starts with the but. But
Shida iko wapi?
where is the problem?
Yeah.
But in that question lies the problem.
Absolutely. And let me tell you, people need to see it for the unjust. It is actually unjust because patriarchy confers privilege on the basis of a lottery of birth. Like literally.
It does.
It does.
That's
Imagine none of us, nobody signs up to be born male or female. So imagine that by lottery of birth, you being male are given all the rights, entitlements, and freedoms.
You get it. You
right?
get it. You have a free ticket.
And me, by being born woman, female, I am denied those very rights. And I had no role in being born that way. It's the same thing when we talk about racism.
Can we go quickly to that point what you were making? Because I mean, this is just, there's so much, Daisy, and you have to come back. But you'd say that those people who are refusing to enact, what is it on the basis of? Because
it's a socialization bias, but also impunity.
I won't forget one current CS for environment today, Aidan Dwale, when he was a member of parliament, and they wanted to debate on this issue of the 2/3 gender principle, and the first issue was there was no quorum in parliament. The next time again, there was no quorum. So is it an intentional thing to not have it done?
Yes.
How do we know that?
It's an act of impunity. The questions that we see being asked, what do women want? Women want free things, almost as though women are seen as coming to reap where they have not sown because of what power entails. You see, for them, it is that privilege and the opportunities that come with power. Why should women be given those entitlements and opportunities? So it's actually impunity and a refusal completely to abide by the law.
As far as they're concerned, everything that the women should get is not theirs. it belongs to the men. So why do they want things that don't belong to them?
And it's probably their very subtle understanding of it. And in fact, so women who are seen to be aggressive and
loud,
you're considered rogue elements,
But also there's a partnership in this from women, because women also help entrench this very, very thing that we
But don't forget that women are socialized the same way as men, right? So even women have to unlearn and relearn. Women need to learn to accept, because even when we build the capacity of women, right, in leadership, there's a lot of work that you need to do, even just to build their confidence to be able to speak.
There's the patriarchy has mothers.
Yes, patriarchy has mothers. And because of my religious beliefs and stand, I have been accused of being a female patriarch. I have, yes, because you see, religion is also considered very patriarchal, which it is, by the way. So sometimes when I express my faith, they say, that one, she's a female patriarch. And it's true. You can have women who are even more patriarchal than men,
Possible.
so that you find it's just female but man in a dress, So, I mean, in terms of attitude, right? And it's true, because even some of the people who have virulently opposed the gender principle are women.
It is.
Including women who hold affirmative action
positions.
And they're like, ikikuja tutaiangusha. But also because of their lack of understanding, right? So it's a journey. It really is a journey.
Are the steps being taken really quickly, like 10 seconds? Steps being taken towards?
Yes. We have petitioned for the dissolution of parliament. We've told the CJ to do her work under the constitution and dissolve, advise for the dissolution of parliament. They are playing some funny games there in court, trying to rehear 4-year-old cases. But I want to say that justice delayed is justice denied. And you can see we are not going to get tired on this. We've been on this journey around this mountain for too long. And if parliament will not do what is required for them to do by enacting the law, then really let them be dissolved. I think that there needs to be political cost to shortchanging women in this country. And that is the greatest political cost that we can see, that the Constitution has given us. And since we are all agreed as Kenyans that Parliament does not serve the interests of Kenyans, dissolve Parliament.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.